life on the right account.
Hello and welcome to Talk BU Live, where today we're joined by a panel of experts from across Bournemouth University to discuss the inauguration of Donald Trump as President of the United States. In just a couple of hours, Trump will be sworn in as the 45th President of the USA following a highly controversial and divisive campaign. In this live broadcast, we'll be discussing the legacy of outgoing President Barack Obama and looking at Trump's campaign and behaviour to date, as well as the potential implications of his presidency, such as political unrest and protests, a fractious relationship with the media, and controversial pledges and promises. This debate was due to be chaired by Dr. Dan Jackson, who's unfortunately ill today, so I'm taking his place, well, trying to anyway. My name's Emma Matthews and I'm from the communications team at Bournemouth University. Please do bear with me. Joining me for the debate are academics from across Bournemouth University with a range of expertise and knowledge in this area. We've got Dr. Yegana Markabati, whose research looks at political unrest and its effect on tourism. Dr. Powell Sorowik, whose research looks at politics, propaganda and public opinion. Politics programme leader, Dr. Shelley Thompson, whose work centres on media framing of social and political issues. And Dan Weissman, an associate lecturer in the Faculty of Media and Communication, who was previously a politics student here at BU as well. We're also really keen to hear from you guys today, so if you are watching and you want to share your thoughts, opinions or any questions that you have for the panel, please do pop them in the comments box below and we'll try our best to answer them live for you. So let's get this discussion underway. Barack Obama will step down today after 8 years in office, during which time he's had a number of kind of significant wins and losses, everything from bringing in an affordable healthcare scheme for the poorest in the country to failing to tighten gun law controls. How do you think his term as president is looked upon currently, and what do you think his legacy as president will be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think Barack Obama is in the short term. I think some people are slightly disappointed with some of the. I'm looking at my colleague Dan here because I think he's amongst those who are skeptical of the Obama legacy. Who are disappointed that he wasn't able to achieve many of the things that he had initially set out to do when he was initially elected. I think the real triumph of his presidency was his first term in office. He had some of the biggest wins in his political career as president during that time, including, as you mentioned, the Affordable Health Care Act, which Republicans have really expected to fall on its face, and it hasn't been, although it's definitely had its problems and its hiccups, it's not failed quite as dramatically as Republicans perhaps hoped. And we now have an expansion in the United States of health insurance to people who were previously uninsured, which makes it, although the Republicans are interested in calling back some of those elements of it, there'll be a moral with something that will continue to ensure people who've otherwise lacked health insurance and health care.
And Dan, so you're one of those who are slightly more critical of Barack Obama.
Yeah, I think in the short term, I think he will. Shelley said, who managed to create Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as it was previously, I think, previous years derided, and now it's proudly called Obamacare. However, I think such as foreign policy and how he presents himself, I have different views on but the handling of it, I think, hasn't been well. Also, domestically, I think there are some issues, and I would have criticism of the Affordable Care Act, that the criticism and the reason why the Republicans can now repeal or think about repealing the Affordable Care Act is because of the flaws. And although at the beginning in 08, in 09, he had the majority of both houses, he failed to put in a strong as they did on the private insurance. And I get where Shelley's coming from, and especially in the light of who is coming now, the darker times or maybe the orange times now. He looks definitely better, and his legacy will look better, especially in the light of the next 4 years.
Okay, and then moving on to Trump, obviously today's the day he is officially becoming President of the United States. During his election campaign, he put forward a lot of quite controversial and divisive pledges and policies, everything from denying climate change to promising to build a wall between the US and Mexico. Some of those things into force, do you think it's a good thing if he does? And what do you think the reaction will be if actually those people who voted on those particular points then find that he can't deliver everything?
So starting with the question around some claims that he made during his campaign and thinking about that, that's in some ways electorate that felt like they weren't being listened to by denial is an incredibly scary thought, given where scientifically there's consensus supporting that human climate change and the catastrophic potential outcomes are not as far out as we would like. So to continue to deny that, I think, is really is going to put the United States back even further, and the United States is behind by every measure in responding to climate change in any kind of considered way. At least as far as the rhetoric around building a wall between Mexico a lot of what came out of the Trump camp as fundamentally that.
Is there anyone here who thinks that potentially Donald Trump becoming president? Are there any potential positives that you can see from having somebody like him?
Absolutely, yes. I'm sure that the business community in the United States and certain executives will be in terms of national security, the way he conducts diplomacy. politics that has got certain conventions, and that I don't think he
sort of impact is his presidency likely to have on the global political stage as well?
Do you want to take this?
I think he will embolden similar characters like from in Thailand now, from Duterte, how President Duterte, how they communicate how we do business. And as Papa said, like that the business language now moves in this, and also in the diplomatic sector, that are we making deals? You know, I'm good at making deals. And I think there is this element, and I think he will be surprised far with this attitude once he sits across someone like Angela Merkel, who won't deal with this, who can't deal with this. Honestly, I think the Republicans aren't with him, and I think this is where I hope, although I disagree with the Republicans' foreign policy, but I disagree with Trump's foreign policy or whatever, what little there is, more with the Republicans than with him. So I think they will rein him in to a certain extent, at least that's what I hope.
And yeah, do you think potentially then there's a risk that there might be more kind of retribution against the US, any increased risk of kind of unrest or terrorist acts, because Donald Trump isn't seen as particularly kind of diplomatic? He might not be able to have those conversations on a global scale. Do you think there might potentially be implications in terms of terrorism and unrest in the country?
Well, not necessary. If we look at overall the election, American election create a binary system, so Brexit. So what has actually happened? We can't say that everyone would be unhappy with Mr. Trump to be president shortly. Just the same way as not everyone were happy with the Liberal Democrat at the time. We can say this because it is Mr. Trump who is elected. Although we're seeing the media is not on his side and steering the situation, but really he is the one who is elected. Now, what is really happening is the fact that Mr. Trump, for President Trump to be soon, has introduced a paradigm change. And a paradigm change in political USA, in a sense. And therefore, the sense of his election is being seen by some as illegitimate or unacceptable because he's touched upon, as you guys all mentioned, touched upon some of the fundamental norms that were acceptable before and during the campaign, or unacceptable. So what is happening? People are seeing that some of these norms are changing, and therefore this change being seen as unacceptable to some and illegitimate to some, and this is the change that creating that things, and people tend to resist change. And I think if you look at the big picture, we have to remember when we are looking at a binary system, some are against him, but clearly not all. So I don't think necessarily this will create an environment that encourage terrorism or not, but we're living in a world that we're dealing with some other issues that we need to remember, and big part of it is the state of the world economics And I think a lot of problems that we are seeing are rather themselves a symptom of a bigger problem. Part of it is the economic outlook. And because the economy is not quite moving the way it should be, if you look at the IMF report of 2016, they describe the world economy as too slow for too long. And these are perhaps the underpinning problems that create the symptom that we're seeing here and there with Trump, with other things. Of course, terrorism is a problem, but again, the terrorism itself also is a symptom of bigger problem.
And do you think Donald Trump, as a kind of businessman who's very much about money, will kind of take the economy and building that wealth again for the country as a priority going forwards, do you think?
I think if I just shortly go over it, I think the world, everyone at the moment in the world trying to get out of this vicious cycle that we have gone through it since the recession. That attempt has been made really to project the image that we are out of global financial crisis, but really we are not. And this has created problem in a sense that globalization is not working anymore, and the idea of protectionism coming out of really resurfacing, because again, going back to the state of the world economy, could he do it? I'm sure he would love to be able to do it, but the answer to that question is $1 million. This is a basically $1 million question. If anyone could answer that, I'm sure they would love to do it.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
There might be something else that is going on here that is kind of beyond Trump's control, and similarly to the situation when Obama was getting into the office, a lot of particularly foreign policy commentators in hindsight assess Obama's foreign policy as too ambitious, and right now we've got those voices saying that Trump or the Trump elect is about to change the world order. I think this is a little bit of an overstatement in many ways, because first of all, we don't know much about his foreign policy. The style with which he spoke about is also quite controversial. So I'll be rather careful and cautious to kind of think about the Trump's world order, so to speak, as a lot of people seems to be implying or indicating.
And we've actually had a comment on the live feed, somebody from Iraq saying that he doesn't care about people from his country. Do you think Trump is going to take that kind of protectionist, America first, not thinking so much about foreign policy going forward?
You had an intake of breath, so I think.
Yeah.
So I go ahead.
I think Obama didn't, in the sense that, and I think it's a general misunderstanding that U.S. foreign policy or foreign policy in general has somehow to do with the well-being of of the people that are infected in an area in the Middle East, for example. It's strategic concerns. It's not concerns of those communities living there. And from that perspective, and Pavel has more expertise in that area than I. From that perspective, I think there will not be a big change from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. Where there might be a change is how much resources is the Trump administration willing to allocate to fighting causes or like the Islamic State or in general in the Middle East. Approaches, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, because there's not much coming out of the Obama or out of the Trump soon-to-be administration in the first place.
Were you going to add to that?
What I was going to say is probably that Trump will make the relationship with Russia his number one priority. His number two priority will be normalization of situation in the Middle East, particularly in Syria. That's, I think, might happen. How is he going to accomplish that? I really don't know. So in terms of strategic priorities, obviously normalization or further development of a relationship with China will be particularly important. He seems to have this notion, or seems to be projecting the notion, that China and the United States are in this kind of incredible and immense Cold War-like competition, but I don't think that Chinese political elites think about it this way, and this is basically where he has to also come to terms with understanding and how to build bridges with China. Yeah, that will be probably his three most important priorities. And because of that, in terms of national security issues, there will be two very important areas. First of all, the situation in Eastern Europe. A lot of countries in Eastern Europe seems to be feeling vulnerable. At the beginning of, or towards the end of December, Obama's administration has executed an order whereby United States troops are located in a few Eastern European countries. So the question is whether those military American troops will actually remain there, whether he will pull them out or not. And also we're looking at another priority in terms of security, national security, cyber security and cyber diplomacy. Because both the presidential campaign has revealed certain weaknesses of American infrastructure and controversies around Hillary Clinton on the one hand, and then we had the infamous dossier scandal that basically revealed allegedly certain activities of Donald Trump that are yet again controversial. So we are definitely seeing a shift in terms of both strategic priorities, but also the way that politics is done, the role and the significance of technology is increasingly growing.
Can I just follow up on that? I also think in this whole issue about Russia and Putin and Trump, I don't think, regardless of what we think of the individuals, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if the two presidents of the world's greatest nuclear powers get on with one another. However, what I'm more afraid is when we get to that point when they don't get on with one another, especially a character like Trump. I think where Putin is, although not to more extent more diplomatic than Trump, not compared to other statesmen, but I think this is something, it would be better if they keep on getting on for the next 4 years. And I totally understand, this is probably a point that Paul would agree with me, that that's not a good thing for the Eastern European countries, and they do not like when Western powers get on with Russia, because they're then in the middle, and they didn't when Schröder got on with Putin in the early 2000s. But I'd rather have that than constant tension and conflict between the world's most biggest nuclear powers, to be honest.
Great, and just a reminder to anyone watching that we are looking to take questions and comments from you, so please do share your thoughts in the comments box, and we'll try and come to those. So moving the conversation along slightly, Trump has developed quite a fractious relationship with the media so far, it's fair to say. He's kind of accused people like CNN of being fake news and refused to take questions from certain journalists, and he's also used his own personal social media as a kind of soapbox for sharing his thoughts, opinions and rebuttals on allegations around him. Do you think that can and will continue when he's president, and what impact do you think that will have on the media's ability to hold him to account?
I think there's multiple parts to that question, starting with the kind of idea of the role of political journalism being a fourth estate, watchdog, that kind of idea. That's sort of one part of the question, and the extent to which Trump's tactics undermine that element. The other part is his social media presence and his use of social media to respond, to make claims, to make announcements, and to respond to critics, which is, though linked in terms of media strategy, are in some ways kind of separate. To have a senior politician of any country tweeting in response to criticisms, because that is one of the roles that we have and that we enjoy in any kind of democracy, is that we are allowed to criticize our political leaders. So for these political leaders to respond in the ways in which Trump has done to some of his more vocal opponents is definitely a concern for I would think everybody. I think it potentially undermines his credibility as a president. If that's the way he's going to potentially operate. I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks that. In terms of,
He needs to get credibility first.
oh, I see. Yeah, I think it does. I think it fundamentally undermines the democratic process. I think it fundamentally undermines the position as a president, as a statesman. I think it undermines the U.S.'s political position potentially, especially as some of the tweets that have kind of come out have been, because we're limited to 140 characters, you can't really deal with political nuance, which is, and these guys that's more their area around international relations. You can't really get to the political nuance of international relations in 140 characters. Or
Well,
can you?
I was just
Or
started
can
thinking
you?
because this morning BBC interviewed a former Secretary of State and one of the former American ambassadors to London, and they asked them about Trump's potential style of doing diplomacy. What I found particularly interesting was basically this notion that he brings his business world luggage, experience in public relations, and his short, powerful PR corporate-like style statements into the world of politics. And I'm also mindful of the fact that academics like to label certain phenomena. So I think that it is very likely that we'll see Trump doing breakfast diplomacy, whereby he will basically...
Is that your term now? Yeah.
That's the reason
You
I want
heard
to
it
say
here
it.
first.
This is where you heard the term breakfast diplomacy, and I'm claiming the right to it. No,
It's the title of Pavel's next book.
You can completely see it when he's basically sitting with a bowl of cereal, with an iPhone in his hand. This is made in America, and he's just going at it.
There you go.
I suppose you could say that forums like that are maybe going to engage with people, and actually Trump's campaign in general, engage with people who maybe have felt excluded from the political process previously because they maybe couldn't understand or kind of get that kind of nuance.
Yeah.
Whereas he's kind of speaking to people as they would talk to each other potentially, or as you talk business to business. Maybe it's engaging a kind of whole new sphere of people who've previously been kind of part of politics because they didn't really feel like it was
For them.
Yeah.
As far as this relationship between Trump and the professional news media organization goes, he demonstrated throughout this campaign that he has got a problem with professionals, generally speaking. Not only news media, but also other professionals, security professionals, economic advisors. So basically, what he's trying to do is just, as far as his relationship with news media goes, is to remove them on one side and communicate directly with the electorate. And so far, on occasions, it seems to have been working for him rather well.
I see an endorsement though for your breakfast diplomacy just coming up on the feed. So there you go.
I think
Thank you, Michelle, for
The trademark sign next to it. Royalties.
It actually looks quite good.
I think Trump generally has like an allergy to expertise, regardless of the field it is in. But also, I don't think he will stop using Twitter because it worked for him so far. So why would he stop it? And also, it is something where he can sidestep the news or the dissemination of news. That's the job of the broadcasters and news, and speak directly to his followers. And also, I think
he can also use a website for that.
Yeah.
Whitehouse.gov.
But it's in the palm of his hand if he does it via Twitter. And
To order
also
breakfast.
And he probably doesn't have a communications
No.
team to really
And
monitor
report
every
it.
little tweet.
And also, I have to criticize the US media and the media in general. I think this is something where the media has made the mistake of listening too much to the DC bubble. And also, I think we have to hear that the media listens too much of the Westminster bubble and not goes out to the country and talking to normal people. This shock after Brexit, they say, oh, how could the country have voted that way? This total shock for people living up north. This wasn't a shock at all. Yeah, for academics further up north, or for people who connected within the communities further up north, this is oh god, which Alex Jones is that? No, is not because doesn't come as a surprise, and it neither came as a surprise for the Rust Belt and the Bible Belt in the US. It's like, no, we're gonna win this. We're gonna win this, and we were listening to those interviews, thinking, oh, it's never gonna happen. And I think the closer we got, I thought, okay, this is gonna happen. So, and all this ticks the box for him that he was right, and the way he communicates is the way forward. Why would you change the winning horse for him, I think?
And Alex Jones has commented on the Facebook feed saying a similar thing. It's worked for him so far. He's talking directly to the people. Why would he change the way he does this? But he's also mentioned that fake news was initially a term kind of used by Hillary Clinton's camp to maybe put down some of the media outlets who were less favourable towards her. And now Trump's using it against journalists who are criticising him. So do you think there's a change? He's using these sort of terms to his advantage. He's changing the way he sees news outlets because it works for him, if that makes sense. Like he's using these terms that potentially worked in his favour beforehand. Now he's seeing them as a criticism of him and kind of changing.
No, of course he does. I mean, the term fake news emerged in the first time thanks to Channel 4 investigative journalist team in relations to Eastern Europe and initiatives sometimes even taken by individual teenagers who are simply making money on social media. There are reports still on Channel 4 news website describing how they were basically using social media to produce certain fake news outlets. So ultimately they were fake because they were not professional, so they didn't subscribe and they didn't follow certain standards. And Trump uses this derogative term as a kind of tool for labeling, name calling, well said and standardized news media organizations, and this is where it becomes problematic, and this is a part of a political rhetorical game.
Some comment from if we go down from Amir, if we could address him.
Scroll down. And thank you, Michelle, for putting the trademark on breakfast diplomacy. Panel, it officially belongs to you now.
Now I have to write a few papers about it.
I think it was the question around Iraq, and I think we've sort of touched on that in terms of Trump's approach to foreign policy potentially and what he's likely to do. I think we're pretty much...
Sorry, I was just going to say, if we can go back to the kind of that first part of the question you initially asked around the sort of media tactics employed by Trump and his team, and take the fourth estate sort of watchdog element that Pavel was just touching on, and thinking about the role of the mainstream media, and not just mainstream, citizen journalists as well are trying to do this and doing it quite successfully, and in some cases more successfully than our mainstream media. And it ties into Dan's point about the Washington bubble, and kind of talking to ourselves in the news media, and we're guilty of it sometimes in academia. So hopefully this is helping. But you know, I think some of the strategies that are being employed by the Trump campaign, and now soon to be the Trump administration, to call out his critics in the news and to ignore, as you mentioned, CNN when they had critical coverage. I think some of that, there was a really interesting piece that I was reading in order to maintain that First Amendment, which is so crucial in is so important to the free press itself. It's a badge of honor. I think there's some real challenges that we're about by any additional regulation, although there's journalists to access information about their government. There's a variety of different ways where that First the Constitution in any way, shape, or form. To make sure that in situations like when the CNN reporter was not being acknowledged by Trump, for the other journalists to ask the question. See how that works.
Could I just add, the point is the fact that soon to be President Trump, he's been elected in democratically elected procedure. So I think we need to give him a chance to show how he's going to deliver rather than only speculating on negative aspects. I think paradigm change and the very existence of this binary system as a result of this election, it has created a very much of a negative vibe. But as I said, let's give him a chance to see what he does.
Well, that seems like quite an interesting point to potentially end on. We're waiting to see what happens with Donald Trump becoming president later today. Thank you very much to the panel for joining us. We hope you found it interesting and useful. And thank you for watching and sharing your comments too. Goodbye.
Bye.